Parker literally just threw a wrench in my opening right before we walked on stage. So I got to think about how to preface this. But I have been in Texas for almost 4 years now, and the reason I'm here is because Parker adamantly suggested that I move here because this is where the center of the universe is, particularly this corner, 6th and Congress. I don't want to say I was skeptical, but big move for me. Born in the Northeast, college in Chicago, lived in New York for 7 years. I'm a Northeast boy. And Parker made the case to come to Texas. I came in 2021. At that time, the Chinese mining ban had just hit, and the hash rate was fleeing out of China toward the United States and other parts of the world. And I came down to Texas and said, let's check it out. And I've been here for 4 years, and it's been pretty incredible. I think what you said actually rings true. It does feel like Texas is the center of a lot of activity, particularly happening in Bitcoin. But you told me not to start with you, to start with Griffin. Griffin, why is Texas suited for Bitcoin specifically?
We rocking and rolling? All right. Howdy, Griffin Havey. I guess kind of my background is I was an oil and gas guy, and then found about this stranded gas well, and he was either going to throw cement in the hole or put some computers out in the middle of nowhere. And he turns out he's making like $12 an MCF for his gas. Well, what that really did was just opened up my eyes of some math that I could never unsee again. Third quiver into basically the oil man's tool belt. Or sorry, third arrow in the quiver. But then really it's taken stranded energy as a thing of the past. And a lot of problems has always been stranded energy. A lot of future problems is always going to be stranded energy. We knew there was gas in, BFE Australia, but why drill it when you can't have a pipeline? You have no market to ever send that gas. So next thing you know, 2 cycles of kind of innovation is happening, and it's starting to click with a lot of oil and gas producers. Why in Texas? You have West Texas is basically where my friend likes to say it's where it's windy, it's sunny, and there's just a shit ton of hydrocarbons in the Permian Basin out there. So as long as you have stranded energy when 90% of the population does not live in West Texas, you're going to have some opportunities. So we basically, after the stranded gas mine, we went out to West Texas. We got like a 300 megawatt permit. Realized there were a bunch of oil and gas guys, didn't know exactly how to start Bitcoin mining. So, kind of divested that. Investors were like, let's get at it again. We start scouring, and a lot of people had found out about the Texas market. So it was very, congested. So we went to the Rocky Mountains up in Utah, found like a stranded solar deal, thought we were going to do the same thing again. Well, hello regulatory, hello monopoly of one power company in there. Got a Dear John letter that kindly told us to, not be a Bitcoin miner there. Go to Argentina. I'm looking for a stranded gas site there, right in the middle of like peso plummeting. I thought there was going to be some arbitrage there. Never really found anything that can compete in West Texas. So as we scour the globe, I'm coming right back to West Texas because you have the regulatory, you have the freedom-loving private property rights, and everything comes together so well in Texas that cheap energy and stranded energy are always going to be a thing. As long as there's oil in West Texas, there's going to be associated gas coming out of that wellbore. And so what you have is this big glut of cheap, sometimes negative natural gas out in West Texas. And it's just like one of the most beautiful molecules in the world that, we used to flare this before natural gas, and our grandkids are going to look back and laugh that we used to set it on fire when it is such a energy dense molecule. And we just happen to be sitting on some hell of reserves right now. Natural gas is trading for over $3. When that happens, what happens to Texans? They go out and wildcat and they find more natural gas. I promise you gas will not stay expensive at all. We're in the middle of seeing what a hedge of natural gas and Bitcoin mining looks like. On one hand, you can have cheap power. On the other hand, you have high cash flows from your nat gas. The high cash flows from a nat gas is only going to increase with the Texas spirit of wildcatting exploration. And we're already finding 40 million MCF a day wells that I guarantee would not be drilled at $2 gas. So future is really bright, and it's only getting brighter.
Taking us back to 2021 again, we had the winter storm that knocked out the grid here. And somebody was thinking about moving to Texas at the time. I was like, oh God, what's happening? Is there a reliable grid? But I think looking at what's happened within ERCOT over the last 4 years, it's actually pretty amazing the amount of generation and interconnect that's been brought online. And Griffin was just talking about off-grid. A lot of this generation that is coming and the stability of the grid over the last 4 years, I would argue, Bitcoin miners have contributed massively to that. So on the on-grid side, in terms of what ERCOT has done to expand generation, what is it about ERCOT specifically that enables that, and why is Bitcoin finally suited for this, Parker?
Yeah, so I mean, I would, and again, just for my background and context, I don't mind Bitcoin, but I've been running the Houston Bitcoin meetup for 4 years, drive down every month until my baby was born 5 months ago. Very close with people in the industry, policymakers here, and have thought a lot about this as we've serviced both at Unchained through the custody side, understanding the needs of miners, as well as on the payment side now at Zaprite. But here in Texas, like one thing that I tell people is that there are no coincidences. Like it's not random. There's places that have more energy underneath the surface, and Texas is the energy capital of the world, both from a technology standpoint as well as from a resource standpoint. And when I think about, and to get to your question, I'll leverage some of the things that Griffin said. It's a very layered set of perfect storm scenarios in Texas, which are starting with God-given resources under the ground, right? Griffin was talking about oil and gas and both of those. Private property rights, which Griffin mentioned. ERCOT, a grid that's specific to Texas. It's connected to the two other grids in the United States, but it's not regulated by FERC, which provides for it to be nimbler and to serve the needs of Texans. The deregulated energy market, which creates innovation. We'll be talking about that at a panel tomorrow. All of the energy infrastructure that's been here for over 100 years, that reduces the marginal cost. And then a big part of it is the culture. That, I was thinking about this before, but West Virginia has a culture around coal, and there's natural gas in the Marcellus, and Wyoming has a bunch of coal. Texas is really just known for energy because there's a lot of energy here. There's an energy mix, and it's in the culture here. Not like people love that they're from Texas, but there's also just a respect and appreciation for it. I think at a very level-headed level. Wildcats, and one of the stories, Griffin or Gideon Powell. I thought Gideon's here, or he will be here. But I remember in 2017 when I was really helping Gideon understand Bitcoin, and as soon as it clicked, he went out to West Texas and built a greenfield 50 megawatt substation. And I remember hearing it from the guy that he called, who worked at Priority Power, and his response was like, "Why are you building a 50 megawatt substation in Pyote?" I think it was in Pyote. But it just speaks to the mentality, and that was at a time when I think the Bitcoin hash rate was like 5 exahashes. There was nothing close to 50 megawatts on the Texas grid, and I think now there's something like 4 gigawatts 8 years later. And when you think about all of those inputs of the natural resources, the private property, the mix of natural resources, the deregulated energy market, the grid that's separate from the rest of the United States, the infrastructure itself, the culture, you have like 7 compounding factors that you can't just copy. You can't just copy and paste it. And so I think that, it's not, there's been a lot of activity that's on the grid here now in Texas. I don't think it's only that, but I think all of that derives from a combination of all of those things. You have cheap, reliable power, and you have a state and a regulatory climate that feeds on that and that wants to incentivize that at every level. And that's what you need for on-grid mining at scale, as well as a bunch of opportunities to mine off-grid or behind the meter.
David, anything to add here?
No, next question. No, just kidding. Kind of to tie in what they both said, Texas culturally is just the antithesis of most of the rest of the world, including the United States to some degree. And if you look at any society anywhere, culturally speaking, the free and politically, geopolitically, the free market always wins, right? Texas, at least up to this point, since its inception, has been, even before it was a part of these United States, right? Whatever flag you want to say was flying over it, had this attitude of, if you want it, you can go get it. Up to this point, we still have that culture, right? We still have that. There is some regulation, right? And we all get angry, when we run up against a wall. But for the most part, like Parker said, it is open for business. So you take that attitude of people that have been here for generations that, moved here, had nothing, built a cabin, pulling water out of a stream. And that has somehow managed to, that attitude of work hard and you can have what you want, has somehow managed to continue multiple generations, whereas it very quickly disappears in other parts of the world, right? Someone comes into power, crushes it, and takes it over. Maybe it's geography, how big it is, right? There's plenty of room. When people talk about, that BS about we're overpopulating the world, I was like, you have not driven through West Texas, right? You have not. It's 4 hours to the next town kind of thing, right? And I don't see anybody for 4 hours driving. That is something that's special about it here. I wasn't drawn to it. I was lucky enough to be here, and then also lucky enough to be in Austin when this whole kind of craziness started happening. I don't know. I wake up every morning and thinking, it's like, I feel like I'm LARPing, right? Like I'm going to wake up someday and they're going to be like, that guy doesn't belong here. Get him out, right? Just because of how much fun I'm having. No industry should be this much fun. You're taking the oil and gas guys, right? And bringing these digital wildcatters, if you will, right? To bringing that digital side together. You're talking about energy and technology melding in a way that has never been done in the history of mankind. And you're putting it in an environment like Texas. It naturally had to grow here. It just had to. And that's what I think is so exciting about it. I didn't have really a lot of experience in either of those, right? So that should speak to you about how much opportunity there is here for someone to come in, get excited about it, find ways to plug in, and really build some just kind of amazing things.
And it seems like things are accelerating even beyond Bitcoin. Like, obviously, we know Elon's got Tesla, SpaceX. I think Twitter's got an office in Lubbock now. Strive Asset Management moved from Ohio to Dallas. You got Samsung building a facility in Taylor, Texas. I believe NVIDIA is going to start building some manufacturing facilities down here as well. As native Texans, does this worry you about keeping that spirit alive as everybody seems to be falling back to Texas at once because of this environment that you're all describing?
Don't California my Texas. It's a big concern.
I would almost echo everything we said here, that it really all comes down to private property rights. And they're seeing that if the government doesn't respect your rights to owning private property, then you have no rights. And it's really the foundation of all your freedom is private property. And the quick history is the Spaniards wanted to incentivize people to come over here in the New World and get a population going. Well, it turns out these things called the Comanches, and they're pretty tough to live amongst. So you had to really give them a huge swath of land. You had to give them, they said, from the heavens to the center of the earth. And so that Spanish land grant gave you a mineral right. They were 300 years before Spindletop, but they now come part of the United States. So then English common law crystallizes those private property rights. So you have a place which is so unique to the world. You can be having a oil well, a gas well, giving you a monthly royalty. You're still farming some of the land. You can put a windmill on there. You can put solar panels on there, and there's still just mailbox money for you because that is like the hardest private property right in the world. And not many people can feel that. You can't describe that to anybody until, the government starts overreaching them. Then they can come down here and build, and the state says, no, we got your back. Run out there and keep building. And this is like the first time you've seen like a very pro Bitcoin administration. Not, hey, we're just not going to hamstring you, we're not going to hold you back, but like, hey, let's put some bills in. It was on, the Senate's top 21, things to get through the legislature this season. And I think, really, as long as Texas is like just that free bastion for private property rights, when sound money is going to be coupled with that, and you start to see kind of a link from the petrodollar system that's kind of waning with, you can say BRICS, you can say anything, but as long as you've got all of this drama in the Middle East and not much reinvestment, and OPEC saying that they're going to, like, the supply and demand is not moving the markets as much as the currency manipulation is. And a lot of people are waking up to that in Houston and all over Texas. And anybody that's trying to run an oil and gas well, when they're selling their product for, $3 a gallon, after they have to go take the risk, they have to, explore with geology, drilling miles down to get this product. Then you send it in a pipeline that you have to pay for the infrastructure. Then it goes to the refinery. Then you're paying more money to get this absolute end product. When you can sell Starbucks coffee for, 3 times X that for running some water over beans, or orange juice is, probably 3X the amount of, a gallon of orange juice compared to a gallon of oil or gasoline. Everyone's starting to kind of see, like, why is this one commodity so far off the rest of the world's commodity? And then you look back, and all of a sudden you say, oh, well, it kind of happened in 1973. We, kind of lost the gold pit, so we are not selling oil for gold anymore. We're selling oil for debt. And so when you go from an asset to a debt system, the energy guys are starting to, like, understand that. And the more they look at it, the more they think that their product should be trading more. And if you can start selling or getting Texans, and I'm experimenting with this like on a little fun, but if you can start selling your oil for Bitcoin, it is ridiculous the amount of wealth you can store compared to holding on to U.S. dollars. And I think that's just, the future can't be any brighter. God bless Texas.
Yeah, and I think to build on that, I don't have concern of the culture changing, or at least I haven't seen it. I grew up here in Austin. Austin's changed a lot, but the culture around Texas hasn't. One thing that I love, I went out to the Midland Bitcoin meetup about, I don't know, a year ago or so, and you drive through Midland, and they have, on the local bank there, the price of oil and the price of natural gas. Like, you don't see that anywhere else in the country. You might see stock prices or the S&P or the Dow, but energy is just so core to the identity of the state. And there's if you accept, like, a lot of people like come up with this, like, oh, a bunch of people from California and Texas or New York are moving to Texas. There's a high cost to switch. Like, there's a high cost to pick up and move, as you know. And people have been filtering into Texas for 200 years because they were leaving some other place that in some form or fashion wasn't honoring their freedoms, and that they came to Texas, as Griffin was talking about. It really was in many ways the last frontier. And I was out in Napa 2 weeks ago to give a talk about Bitcoin in general to a group of orthopedics, and my first reaction when I was out there was like, whoa, this place is beautiful. Like, this is so nice. And then you have the recognition, like, and people are leaving this place, and they're coming to Texas, and it doesn't feel so great in Texas a lot of the year. It's like people don't move to Texas for the weather. And so my point is both what I see in terms of the people that are moving here, how people are filtering in, as well as the reasons for that both evidence-based as well as, if you were to try to explain it, the culture's not changing. And now that we have Bitcoin, and while some people are trying to change Bitcoin, it's hard to change Bitcoin. And this anchor of sound money, if there was a concern, if we were on the brink, now that Bitcoin's here, I think people are going to be re-anchored to reality, and it's even less of a concern that Texas will be the center of hash. I've heard of multiple people that are spec building a gigawatt of power. It's like that's what happens in Texas, and so long as that's true, and we have cheap power and we value it, that everything is downstream from that.
No, I will say even beyond mining and energy too, I think it's very important that we have the Park Austin. It's still taking me a while to not say the Commons, but the Park Austin, particularly on this corner, like you said, like we're a catty corner, the UATX across the way. We've got the mothership down the street here. It seems like Austin, specifically within Texas, is becoming this cultural hub, and I think having the park here, specifically where it is very important because we're seeing a lot of cross-pollination between us and UATX. We've been doing a lot of events over there. We've brought some of the comedians from down the street into the studio to record podcasts, and I think this is a great cultural hub, and having a presence here as a Bitcoin community is important so that we can begin extending olive branches to all these tangential sort of communities that are budding and coming to Texas as well. So in terms of like the leverage of influence that exists down here, it's unlike anything I've ever seen, even when I lived in New York for 7 years.
Speaking of being right down the road from the mothership, I'd like to take this moment to Griffin Habe for governor. Just whenever you're ready to make the official announcement, I think we can do it right here. Just letting you know. No, this is, Marty, what you're saying is probably the most fascinating part of Bitcoin to me. It's when I first got introduced to it, it was described as like an octopus, right? You had the tentacles, and they were all out. They were all connected, operating on the same brain, right? But like they were all out in these weird reaches doing different things, right? You had the technical side of it. You had the network. You had development. You had layer twos. You had financial. You had political. You it's just the hardware side, infrastructure, energy, right? There's all these different things. And it's really interesting. Those tentacles have gotten shorter, right? Like they're working in conjunction on the same projects now, right? That's really interesting. At Mining Disrupt this last year, you had a few people show up that I didn't expect to see, right? Like Lawrence Lepard was there talking about his new book, right? Which is phenomenal. Samson Moe was there, right? From Jan 3, right? So you're seeing all of these, this cross-pollination of ideas that can only be done organically, right? Like you see, Griffin was talking about, the solar farm, right? And you're talking about a lot of these projects have been forced through government subsidies, somebody on the outside saying, hey, we needed to do it this way. Someone who had no clue, right? But they had power and they had money and they had the purse strings saying, we need to do this. This industry is self-funding. That's what a lot of people don't understand, what make it so special, right? There's no government subsidies really. Yeah, regulation, positive regulation is a good thing and will accelerate, right? But I think it was Lisa Huff actually that told me this. Great conversation. She's like, yeah, it just hit her one day. These are people, individuals, and it all started with private equity and things like that, just saying, yeah, I'm going to bet on this. I'm going to put in the blood, sweat, and tears, literally tears, right? I'm going to put it in there, put in the work, and do this and finance this. Well, that's contagious, right? So some of that is goes in with that Texas culture, but it draws people like you and everybody else from outside, regardless of whether it's here or another state, it doesn't matter. That culture is infectious, right? So you get comedians, you get engineers, you get big data, right? Coming in. All of these things, Bitcoin's that hub, right? That everybody can come to. Almost every industry that operates on money, and I'd like for you to name me one that doesn't, right? Is going to eventually have to come into that hub. and worked at. And that's what I think is so special about, this space, what Parker's built, all of these companies have enabled that to happen, right? And they were, even though you're sometimes painfully way ahead of your time, right? Eventually, they're all going to have to come to that spoke.
Yeah. So it looked like Arizona was going to be the first state to pass a strategic Bitcoin reserve, but Katie Hobbs vetoed it. Is Texas going to be first?
I don't know. I kind of think it might fizzle out in the House. I think John and Gideon are going to talk a little bit tomorrow about some of the stuff that's happening on the Hill. I actually think it's more likely the bill that they're working on as relates to energy to incentivize large flexible loads to co-locate with new generation to get jumped in front of the line is not only a great bill, but stands to have a greater impact than the buying Bitcoin in Treasury. I'd probably handicap it at 50-50. It passed out of the Senate with a lot of support. It has support in the House. I watched the hearing. There's a lot of people that just don't know what this thing Bitcoin is. It's hard to get consensus of a group of people that don't understand it to move forward. I'm confident that the governor would sign it if they did, but I see just kind of last mile hurdles if I'm being realistic. But paying attention to HB 3970, which is the energy bill, that I think is of greater consequence.